Hello and welcome to Dreamy Thatch Grove. I am very happy that you have found your way here. Tonight we're reading the story of the Midwinter Snarl and the Snowmelt Poppy, a tale from Dreamy Thatch Grove in the Veillands. The sleepy port city of Dreamy Thatch Grove sits at a place where the borders between worlds thins to a sheer membrane. This other world, the one beyond, goes by many names. It is a realm of dreaming, of magic and fairies, of creatures and beasts and monsters. It is the Veillands, the place just beyond the portal doors found in the wooded forest just at the edge of town. You can catch glimpses of this magic all throughout Dreamy Thatch Grove, in the sparkling motes of light flowing through the waterways, in the chirp of the antlered corvids the city is known for, in the unusual and unpredictable plant life dotting the landscape, and in the strange and otherworldly offerings at the nearby Moondrunk Cafe. These glimpses into the Veillands travel into this world mostly by way of dreams, which cast a tantalizing light into the night sky and the world beyond, and the mythic creatures who call it home often cannot resist the accidental invitations the sleeping townspeople have offered. Right on the edge of town, where the forest just begins to thicken back into wilderness, and the purpled portals to the Veillands sit tucked between twisting tree trunks draped in wisteria, there is one such being who has crossed the threshold here to the waking world. Not a critter or a monster or animal, as is so common around these parts, but Bryn Barlow, a helper witch from the Veillands, eager to assist the townsfolk who struggle to contend with the effects of the creatures who cross over. Her cottage is currently dusted with a fine powdery snow and dotted with twinkling fairy lights, just like the rest of the city. The slow ticking of the train wheels on the tracks headed out of town meld in with the sound of cars slowly driving by on the snowy road just outside her frosty window. Today is a big day for her. She's not just headed to her usual shift at the Moondrunk Cafe to prepare potion-infused coffees and teas for her regulars. No, today she has an important task she has been planning for a year now. You see, it is in the glacial quiet, somewhere between the winter solstice and the vernal equinox, that the deep caverns and the hilly forests of Dreamy Thatch Grove begin to surface for the first time since autumn. The packed snow gives way despite the frigid winter winds whipping about, opening like a doorway for one of the strangest and rarest creatures observed around the grove. While most Veilland creatures that emerge here are given names that at least approximate what animals they resemble, this one can't be given the same treatment. They stand in the small minority of these monsters who avoid pestering or interacting with the people who live in the nearby city. They actually appear to actively hide from view as best they can, said to be ducking behind trees and brush, staying still, watching. They try to remain sight unseen, always in your periphery. By the time your head turns their way, all you can see is snow-covered antler, and would likely just assume it's part of a nearby tree, none the wiser. As such, they have been named not for their appearance or their phylogeny, but for the low, rumbling sound that is said to carry on the wind that remains the only reliable way to identify that it is nearby. It is named the Midwinter Snarl. Their hermetic nature has made them difficult to observe and document, so research bleeds into mythos. Some tell of wolves 10 feet tall. Some say they're more plant-like than animal at all. Some claim they've met them firsthand, and they appear like humans right until they pounce. Most of these tales are considered false, but a few are common enough to be considered likely true. They are believed to be around 7 or so feet tall, white or pale in color, and have some kind of dendritic horns or antlers with a white velvet that drapes down. They are thought to use these horns to blend into the snow-covered willow and wisteria of the area. People have said that the fur that covers them seems more like clothing, leading to a few theories that they may wear pelts from other animals of the forest for warmth. They have been spotted most often around waterways, though that's likely to be more about where the townspeople frequent. Exploration later into the spring, once these creatures have gone, have yielded evidence of their existence in those small caverns atop the hills, whose entrances melt open with the sudden materialization of the snarl. As a witch from the Veillands herself, Bryn knows a bit more about the Midwinter Snarl than most in the grove, though, to be fair, growing up there does not mean she often ventured to the highest mountain tops on the other side of the isle to closely observe the carnivorous and cantankerous monsters. Still, she knows what she's heard from the fairy folk and from Mother Deciduous. She knows that there is probably only one snarl at any time, and no request for an explanation on how their reproduction works has gotten a straight answer from the tree fairies. She knows they do not have quite the same reputation in the Veillands as they do here, known not as dangerous beasts, but as solitary ones, who are unlikely to devour any who tread in their claimed ground. However, she was told tales that they scare away intruders with a threatening wave of hazel switches, but she suspects that this was mostly to scare her away from bothering them, and if that's the case, it was smart because it worked. She also knows which dreams call them to the waking world. It is dreams of hunger in the late autumn and early winter, around the first snowfall of the season. Any who fall asleep with an empty belly when the temperatures shift with the north wind run the risk of having visions of their own hunger as they sleep. It is these which call upon the Midwinter Snarl to hunt. Yes, they are by far one of the most frightening beings that enter Dreamy Thatch Grove. Nothing like the endearing mischief of most of the town's magical critters. They are one of the only Veillands monsters that do feast on human flesh, and they much prefer to do so without attacking or fighting, having such little time and energy in this odd liminal space weather. The hunt of the Midwinter Snarl is not one of chase and battle. Rather, it is a game of strategy and patience on their part. Instead of physical altercations, they will more or less corrupt local flora. With the icy touch from the long, knobby-knuckled finger of this tundra monster, a plant will undergo a series of chemical and biological changes that transform it into something entirely else. Bryn suspects that if it wanted to, the snarl could use this power to turn usually great harvestables into poison in the hopes that unsuspecting passers-by will pick and eat the plants without checking properly. However, it doesn't quite do that. Instead, they lay snares, a common tactic of various Veillanders, particularly the fairy folk, of setting traps and deceits to get what they're after. The snarl targets plants that are themselves already poisonous, and with the sounds of crackling ice and swirling wind, it will alter its appearance to look more akin to its edible or potable counterparts, an uncanny valley interpretation of safety. The changes will also frequently downgrade lethal poisons to have a more paralytic effect, trapping the one who partakes of the fruit in place, like they're frozen in the winter chill. It is thought that these beasts think of themselves as highly moral and elevated beings who only feast on the deserving, and that by virtue of being so easily tricked, these people have earned their fate, and by virtue of being so clever, they themselves have earned their supper. And so it is without an ounce of guilt or shame that they drag the frozen or woozy victims through the deep woods and up into their stony lair, to devour them before returning to the Veillands' high mountains, perpetually snow-capped in its temporal haze. These beasts, rather luckily, can only survive in very cold weather, so it hunts quickly and returns back to the mountain caves to transport home before the season turns. Another thing Bryn knows about the snarl is that the reason they stay as long as the weather will allow is surprisingly superficial for such a supposedly highbrow animal. The snarl is drawn deeply to the mountaintop view of Dreamy Thatch Grove because it cannot resist the view of all the twinkling lights that adorn the quiet cityscape this time of year. They take to changing only a couple of plants each year, but a variety. It's important to keep the number low, so they can keep a watchful eye on the few they choose in turn, so as to not miss their hapless prey before the paralysis wears off. Furthermore, changing up what types of plants they corrupt makes them harder to predict and therefore harder to trace. Bryn, being both of the Veillands and also a well-studied botanist, has gotten particularly good at discerning which specimens have been corrupted by the Snarl. She makes sure each late winter to take a long hike into the woods on the outskirts of the grove to check for these deceptive plants and keep the townspeople safe. She can usually find most or all of them on her first pass, though it's hard to be confident as the number can vary from about 3 to 6 depending on the year. There are the glass frost apples, which are previously one of the few apple varietals that can cause fainting spells, and upon the Snarl's touch are ensconced in a thin layer of ice that over a few nights bonds to the skin of the fruit to become almost translucent and iridescent. They closely resemble the grove's famous crystalline apples, which are not only perfectly safe to eat, but also sweeter than any apple you've tried before. They can be differentiated from the poisonous glass frost apples by the color variations in their reflections. Then there are the plums and other stone fruits that the grove naturally grows, some of which are called sugar pie plums, and they get so cold if not harvested in time that they will become frostbitten. The freezer burn effect actually caramelizing the plums and chemically cooking the fructose into a syrup as the fruit softens on the tree, tasting like confectionery sugar plum straight upon picking. Of course, there are also the very deadly grave plums, and unfortunately these are a common choice for the Snarl to transform to look like sugar pie plums. These have probably gotten him the most victims of any individual plant, given how beloved and sought after the sugar pie plums are this time of year. Indeed, most of the plants need to be disposed of, burned or composted, but there is one plant that she never throws away, the Snowmelt Poppy. Before its sinister change, it is originally a varietal of poppy found exclusively in Dreamy Thatch Grove, aptly named the Thatch Poppy. It is famous for being so bitter that its tea can be lethal, as it makes the drinker too nauseous to eat for weeks on end, and 2 confirmed cases have starved to death as a result. Now that people know not to consume the flower, it is mostly known for its pepper pollen, which act much like crushed black pepper when airborne, and can cause sneezing fits that last for hours. But as the Midwinter Snarl turns its chosen plants to appear edible, the molecular changes the poppy undergoes actually alter these undesirable properties significantly. Its pollen becomes less powdery and more sweet and viscous, so it cannot as easily become airborne and agitate anyone's sinuses. The drops of this nectar that fall on the ground around it have such a low melting point that will actually clear a 2-inch radius around the blossom of any snow and ice, giving the flower its name. The leaves go from a light green to a deep, rich dark, and the petals desaturate to a perfect white before developing 2 burgundy purple streaks down each one, nearly resembling the perfectly safe jaspermint poppy, which makes a lovely tea. The bitter scent swells into a soft, spiced, vanilla-like aroma mixed with a bold hit of cardamom. Now it should be noted that in this raw form, the Snowmelt Poppy does still contain the Midwinter Snarl's poison, and consuming it will still incur its paralytic effects, so great care must be taken in its preparation. First, be sure to rinse the flowers in flowing river water to disperse any remaining powdery pepper pollen. Then soak the plucked leaves in lunar vinegar overnight. Keep the flowers in water so they don't dry out. The next day, you can now combine the petals and the leaves and gather clean, fresh fallen snow. Put the snow in your cauldron and boil the flowers and greenery in 2 fistfuls of snow per petal. Once boiling, put to a simmer and let it stew for 3 days, ensuring at least 1 day is a new moon. On the 3rd day, strain the mixture and bottle the liquid. The boiled flowers can be made into petal jam, and the leaves can now be dried, crushed into a fine powder, and added to potions. When this refined and purified version of the Snowmelt Poppy is imbibed, it has a curious effect. Aside from its lovely aroma and calming taste, this changed blossom can ward away evil eyes and lighten any curses or hexes. All nice, to be sure, but there are other means to achieve this for an experienced helper-witch. What is specific to this poppy is the mental changes that come about. The Snowmelt Poppy lifts away the shackles of naivete and reveals to its drinker those who have lied or manipulated, those it would be prudent to distrust. A very helpful tincture for a witch to have, as you can imagine. The year after she discovered the Snowmelt Poppy, there was another rash of them, and she was overjoyed. This time she decided to share it with the others at the cafe. It became a hit with her most trusted regulars, and they all told her they eagerly awaited the following year's batch. But the next year, there weren't any at all. No, they were still just the regular old thatch poppies, and she sneezed a fit after looking around the area for long, desperate to find any that have been altered by the Snarl's magic. This year she looked around early as soon as snow began to fall. Nothing yet again. She's certain the Snarl could tell that his snares were harvested, and is too wise and prudent to revisit flowers that have proven fruitless for his hunt. And now that it's past the winter solstice, it is time to carry out her plan. She waited by the thatch poppies at dusk for a week, until she could feel it in her periphery. Hear the low rumbling and the soft, crisp crunching of snowfall underfoot. I know you're here, she says in all directions at once, still not sure where exactly he may be watching her from. The silence carries on the blowing wind like a warning. Bryn, however, is not very good at heeding warnings when there are delicious tinctures on the line. She speaks again towards the tangled branches of the birch trees on her left. I don't mean to be a bother, but if you wouldn't mind changing some of these poppies, I would greatly appreciate it. This time the silence feels pensive, and she simply waits and waits, demonstrating patience until a crackled, rugged voice scratches its way across the frosty landscape. You would have me make another snare. Do not you know what these flowers can do, girl? Yes, please, she says, apropos of nothing. It makes a marvelous tea once I boil the poison out. The wind whispers to leave before it's too late, but she stays just as she is in her determination. She doesn't wait long for a reply, expecting it to want to leave her alone rather than engage. I don't mean to offend, Snarl. I hope you take my request as a compliment of your fine work. An appeal to its ego seems right to start with. And I'm sure that you can tell that you and I come from the same place, can't you? He answers in silence again, but she knows that he can see that she too is from the Veillands. She continues on, emboldened by the rush of being this close to one of the most mysterious cryptids of legend there is. I could tell right away these weren't real jaspermint poppies. There's one too few burgundy stripes along the petals. Another low rumble, as cantankerous as she's been told they are. You think my illusion underwhelming, do you? Oh no, not at all. I think it's expertly done, a near perfect facsimile. I don't imagine most anyone could tell the difference. She's taking a risk now, betting on appealing to his high self-image by imitating one of her own. I must be the only botanist there is that could see beyond such incredible work. Dearest Snarl, don't you think it's only fair to reward my cleverness? Just think of how sharp one must be to see past your creations. The slightest shift of weight crinkles the snow under him. She thinks she may have seen movement in one area, and her heart races with the thought that she could be staring at the Midwinter Snarl right this moment. Reward your cleverness. It hits like a hiss, and she can't help the shiver that runs through her. Yes, of course. I was careful enough not to mistake these for being edible. Don't you think that's worthy of reward? And what, pray tell, if I find it unforgivably rude to ask for something while offering nothing in return? Perhaps your cleverness alone cannot save you from your deserved fate. It could, because she was clever twice. She came prepared with an offering and takes it out of her satchel now, presenting it forth. It is a small glass bottle with an atomizer attached to the top. Inside is a few ounces of a clear, sparkling liquid swirling around. Of course I've come to offer you something in return. This is firework perfume. You can have it free of charge, though as I've said, I would so appreciate your help in changing these poppies for me. She lets him be silent again, not respecting another response. One spritz, after the sun has set, is enough to attract a dozen fairy light flies. The fairy light flies are a subspecies of fireflies. Many, many years ago, a particularly frisky and adventurous fairy came over from the Veillands and fell in love for a time with a firefly here. Their offspring has evolved over time into the fairy light flies, whose bioluminescence and sparkles crackles off of them in mystifying motes of light, glittering in a spectacular, hypnotic, sparkling show. They are one of the only creatures that are now naturally found, both in the grove and in the Veillands. If what she's been told of these beasts is true, and despite all the pomp and narcissism he clings to, he simply loves the look of the twinkling lights around the city, then a few dozen fairy light flies dancing and glowing around him will delight him more than his vanity would ever let him admit. I'm going to leave it just here for you, and if you like it, feel free to repay me with a batch of Snowmelt Poppies. If I can tell that you like it, I might just leave another bottle for you next year too. And with that, she inches near the tree line, almost able to feel the warmth of another figure next to her, and sets the potion on the ground next to the nearest tree. Thank you very much for speaking with me. Have a nice day, Mr. Snarl. The next night, she goes back to the patch of thatch poppies, and she does not see the Midwinter Snarl again, but she does see the burgundy stripes and thickened nectar pollen of her favorite winter flowers.